Hi, and welcome to The Working World. I'm Kara Mendez.
And I'm Jamie Lingham.
Jamie, we just had a super interesting conversation with Kiri Stejko, the CSO at Parent at Work and Family Friendly Workplaces. My gosh.
It was, I got to say, Karen, my head is still spinning. I mean, the direction about, having, well, I suppose the whole inclusive nature of including families and having, policies to do with families and working from home, etc. I mean, that's obviously been around for a long time, but COVID has really accelerated that whole process. And Kiri was just, as I said, my head is spinning. I'm just going, how can I implement this policy, or what can I do for that procedure? It's, yeah, no, it was really good. And I've got to say, I hadn't heard the saying, what was the home shirking? Sorry, home shirking. I just love it. I think it's quite a funny one.
Shirking, yeah, I think that's something we both took away from this.
Yeah.
But I guess for everybody watching at home or at work, for HR managers and managers in general, this one's a really good one for understanding what's possible around the service offerings from Kiri's organization, but also the baseline best practices that they can start thinking about to help make their organizations a more family-friendly workplace. Great one to get you started.
I agree, Karen. I think that if you haven't got a policy, great place to start. If you have got a policy, great place to learn and work out where you can improve it, because I tell you, there's a lot of experience there. So, Kiri, welcome to the working world.
Hey, Kiri, welcome. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good. Kiri, I'm wondering, can you tell us, in relation to family-friendly workplaces, what does that mean for our viewers, and how do organizations go about building that within their culture?
I mean, what this means really, I love the fact that people are now talking about family-friendly workplaces. Obviously, that's the business that we're in, but what it really means is, we're in the first sort of generation historically where the majority of families have more than one working parent. We don't have the traditional model of, there's one person taking care of the finances and the other person taking care of the home responsibilities. That is becoming, less the case due to cost of living and just changes in women in the workforce. And therefore, everyone is doing this juggle, that everyone in the workplace, doesn't matter your gender or your stage in life, we're all juggling. And we're not just juggling parenting, though parenting is obviously one type of outside of work responsibility, but more and more now we're juggling caring responsibilities more broadly. You might be in the sandwich generation, you might be caring for an elderly family member, chronic illness, terminal illness. There's lots of different caring types. And again, we're all sort of figuring our way through this. And so workplaces are acknowledging this and acknowledging a role in that. And, how do we sort of share some of that responsibility to ease the burden on employees who have these multiple responsibilities? I have literally got, sorry, we might have to go back because I've got, can you hear it? A leaf blower right outside my front door.
That's the worst.
Someone who's right at my front door. This is the joys of virtual working.
Hey, we could just leave all that in, right? Because I think that you are living through reality. Like there's this whole, it's like the Instagram world. There's Instagram reality, there's reality. You know what I mean? This is Zoom reality.
Yes, totally. I've got my headphones in, but I'm like going, oh, what is going on? Anyway, so look, it's all about the workplace acknowledging that everybody has lots going on outside of the workplace. And we now work flexibly, and you don't have a sort of 9 to 5 necessarily schedule either. And so we're blending work and family, and how do we support that as an employer? That's really what it's all about.
Okay.
So I'm just curious on what your thoughts are in relation to how prepared companies actually were for COVID. It feels like a lot of this, sort of family-friendly work environments might have been a nice thing on the corporate responsibility checklist. But actually, how ready were companies for this?
Yeah, good question. So the business that we're in, which is, part of what we do is called Parents at Work. We've been doing this for 10 to 15 years. And as, the years have gone by, the conversation has become a little easier. And since COVID, it's been really a lot easier than it ever was. And the, organizations are now they've seen the reality of people's personal lives and managers. And, we've all been drawn into each other's, leaf blower environments. And so we actually see the pets, we see the partners, we see the family members. It's a different conversation post-COVID. I think you're right, pre-COVID, one of the biggest conversations that was a challenge was the flexible work conversation. And there was a lot of managers and organizations who would say, no, that's not possible with the way we work. You really have to be in the office, and there's particular hours you have to be in the office, and you cannot do your job unless you're in the office. And anyone who's working from home, they might be shirking from home, and we can't have any assurance that they're actually going to be doing their job in the way they need to do it, because we can't see them. And that was a lot of what the conversation was pre-COVID. And then probably if there's one good thing that we can say has come out of COVID, I would say it's flexible work, and the reality that everyone has had to do it in some form or another, obviously shift workers, aside, that we've all sort of proven it's possible. And anyone who previously said it wasn't now really doesn't have that solid base to stand on. So yeah, I think there's a lot more to family-friendly workplaces than just flexible work. Of course, there's parental leave, and there's caregiving, and there's well-being. I think the topic of well-being for families has really escalated and elevated as well through COVID. So not just for families, I think for everyone, because we know that obviously there's mental health concerns now, but more so than ever. But yeah, I think that probably answers that question.
Yeah, no, it's funny because one of the big topics at the moment, or I guess a buzz phrase, is the future of work. And even though that kind of depicts some sort of futuristic state, the future of work, I guess, in a flexible work environment is actually current day, right? We've already moved into the future of work state, be that flexibility, working, like you said, working remotely. But I guess your one of your key points too is the additional or parallel part of that is parental or elevation of parental caring flexibility, not just from a physical location point of view, but also acknowledging the responsibilities around it as well. And so I wonder whether what's your thoughts around organizations saying that they've had that, or saying that they have that, versus actually really having that in practice? Do you think that they're going to have to be able to demonstrate that more wholeheartedly in order to attract and retain the best talent?
Absolutely, 100%. I think, it would have had to have happened eventually anyway, because I think the generations coming through have started to work differently and do expect more of a, flexible, remote, or work from anywhere kind of approach. Which is not to say that everyone just, yes, it will help with attracting a more diverse talent pool, because obviously if you can hire people who are not within your current, headquartered city, for example, then you're opening up and broadening out your talent attraction strategy. But also it's becoming the expectation. And so I think COVID has accelerated that. There's no doubt about that. And also proven that we can hire talent who are not right here, right now, and could be anywhere in the world, depending on obviously time zones and the barriers that might come with that. But yeah, I think that the lived experience and what organisations have by policy are really important that they match now. So we're seeing more and more organisations put out there that they've updated their parental leave policies. So we're removing labels such as primary and secondary carer. That really is a strange concept anyway. Parents are parents, and everyone's just as important in the parenting life. And organisations are announcing and proud to say, we're gender equal approach. No sort of, you're more important than you as far as parenting goes. And that's what the next generations are expecting, as well as this sort of work from, we can have a flexible work approach policy, and the organisation's culture will be known for it. So yes, for talent attraction and retention, it's really important.
I was just going to say on that point though, I guess one of the things that I'm seeing from the work that you're doing is there's a certification tied to family-friendly workplaces. And so is that is that aspirational for a lot of organizations? Is that hard to achieve? Like, how do you ensure that that certification is met and upheld?
Yeah. Okay, good. We've only just introduced this, launched it literally May this year.
Okay.
We've been working on it for a couple of years, partnered with UNICEF Australia on that, as well as a number of strategic partners. But there's a sort of, obviously there are baseline standards that organizations need to meet in terms of policy and practices that support the policy. And so the experience that goes with, for example, parental leave or flexible work. But there is also a broad range, right from the beginning of the journey right through to being best practice, leading employer, employer of choice. When an organisation will be certified, not only do they have those baseline sort of policies and practices in place, but they've also committed to an action plan for 2 years to continually building their family-friendly workplace culture. And so there'll be gaps. No one's perfect. No organisation is perfect yet. And there'll be gaps on what organisations could be doing. And they have endorsed an action plan to say, we fly the flag. We want people to know. We want to attract talent. We want to retain people who have family responsibilities. And we will continually get better at this. And then 2 years later, obviously. So we ran a national working family survey to get the baseline data for this in 2019. Which we're running again this year. There was 6,500 responses in 2019, and hoping to get that, if not more, again, to have sort of where we've shifted. And it'll be interesting to see, given COVID has happened in that time. And so that will give us more data and continually sort of elevate and shift and move with the times as it comes to the future of work, as it comes to how do we support families. So
that sounds fantastic. I mean, it sort of seems a bit like ISO, sort of 9,000 certification. So you have to go through, certain levels to meet it. And I'm guessing that you'd have to go through the same reassessment every year to look where the deficiencies are and what did you do to meet it.
Yeah, looking at that action plan every year. The certification is every 2 years. And the action planning, revisiting that every year to go, right, what traction have you made and what can we reprioritise for the year ahead? And so
on the attraction side of things for potential employees, and I think that COVID has definitely taught us. I mean, Karen is a living example of that. She has a role that is Sydney based. She's obviously lives in Melbourne and is successfully managing that. I think COVID's really taught us that is totally possible. It obviously saves cost on going and buying renting a new property if your team is growing. So I think there's a lot of multiple benefits that come from that. What I was going to ask is now this certification, once companies start to get this in place, will we see this in advertising? So in like a Seek ad, will they put it out there in the ad? Will they put it on their LinkedIn profile? How will companies actually really lean on that to attract and retain?
Yeah, they will. That's exactly right. So there is, of course, the logo that, we want to see attached to job ads, to, company signatures, to websites, etc. Just to really continue to inspire and lead other organisations to want to do the same, because that's the whole point of it, right? Those who are already doing it, great. Now we want those who are not doing it to start thinking about it, which is the power of the PR machine out there. But look, I think the other thing that I have noticed is that companies already are putting this on their company benefits pages. So, you go in and have a look on the careers pages and you'll see we have a flexible work approach. We have a gender equal parental leave policy. We offer, 16 weeks paid parental leave. And a lot of this is already a really intrinsic and important part of what people are looking for in choosing an organisation that they're going to work for. So it's the kind of next step of that. It's saying, you know what, we know this is important to people and we're committed to it. Here's our proof that we're committed to this. Yeah,
I think the certification is going to be really important for a lot of employers, because I know, going through experience of working full-time and raising 2 children, when you went through that whole journey of entering the workforce and then going through that change of life, you look at employers who say those things, and some say and do, some walk the walk, and some say and don't do. And so the certification, I think, will bring a greater level of comfort to employees to know that they're actually an employer of choice, so to speak, and that they're delivering on those commitments that they put in the job ads, right? So
yeah. I mean, that's it. There's one thing to have a policy, which we all know. That's
just
great.
a lip service.
Yeah,
correct.
Then it's about what are the practices that go around that support the policy, and then it's about, and we know this, managers and their enabled experience, understanding, you know, how much do they know about the policy, how to support their people through these major life moments, and that can vary. And we know that people work for their managers a lot of the time, and depending on that experience, that can have a big influence on whether or not you stay with an organisation. And so, you know, ensuring that managers understand what is needed to support people with family responsibilities, and keeping that caregiving conversation open, because that, again, is what something COVID gave as a gift, was it opened up the caregiving conversation. You know, suddenly we were all talking about our family lives in a way that potentially we hadn't before. And so let's keep that conversation open and going. And then, you know, we can have a bit more of an empathy-led management culture.
Kiri, I think that you'd obviously have the stats. I certainly don't, but I'd imagine there'd be quite a number of women who don't return to the workforce because obviously they take maternity leave, or they might be on a second round of maternity leave. Do you think having these this sort of certification and these policies in place will encourage people, or you know, to return to work, not necessarily sooner, but just return to work full stop?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, big missing piece of the gender equality conversation to date has been, let's talk about men. Let's talk about where men play a role in taking parental leave, working flexibly. You know, the more sort of dads that have the opportunity to take however long is the paid parental leave, that enables partners or you know, women to go back to the workforce, but also gives them an opportunity to get involved in early childhood, which they haven't had before. And a lot of men do want that, and there has been policy prevention on that, men and partners. You know, it depends on the policy setup. So yeah, I think absolutely, you know, this is going to help get certainly women back into the workforce earlier if they want to, and enable more return to work in itself, but also just the career break issue and the financial break issue that we've faced. That's going to be a little bit more equalised as this becomes a bit more of an equal. Certainly the organisations that have removed the labels on parental leave, everyone just takes, you know, the same amount of parental leave, paid parental leave. It is still women who are taking the extended, you know, period in the majority of cases. But over time, you know, this is going to shift, as we've seen in other countries around the world.
Kiri, you mentioned support for managers, and being a HR practitioner myself, my mind went to around how, you know, I can better support my main stakeholders. And so I wonder whether, you know, outside of the accreditation, is there anything that you know, your organisation does to equip managers, I'm thinking support or services, that can help them kind of understand how to put these actions into motion? And I guess not even just limited to managers, but also around how HR managers can also put those commitments that are in their job ads and their policies into action.
Yeah. I mean, managers are such an important part of the whole conversation. We know how much, you know, managers influence, you know, the work experience that people have. And so, yes, of course, our organisation has a big emphasis on the role of the manager. And we have, you know, we've got online training services. We deliver webinar training, you know, forums for leaders. We work with employee network groups internally and ensure that leader sort of role models and stories are shared, so that, because obviously the more that is shared from the top, that will influence the culture as it goes down. So whether it's someone who has a caregiving role or working flexibly, you know, just really, you know, showing good examples of leaders and sharing that internally is really important. And consistently ensuring that every manager has the same amount of information on how to support their people with family responsibilities, no matter what that is, whether it be parental leave, which is a really core need, but also caregiving and, domestic violence and early pregnancy loss, and still, all of these different sort of impacts that we have whilst we're working. And, it's difficult to just continue on. I think managers need to be aware of all the things that impact on our work lives, and just keep that caregiving conversation open. So obviously our mission is to consistently get that information to managers to enable them. And same for HR, teams, of course. Our core partners are obviously HR teams, and I'm from an HR background myself as well. And we're just an extension of HR teams really to help on this whole topic.
So, Kiri, you touched on earlier in the discussion just about how, there's those old school managers who need their team sitting in front of them to feel like they're working. And the reality is they could be sitting on the other side of the office watching cat videos. And you brought up, shirking from home, which I loved. I haven't heard of that one, so that's a good.
I was going to say, I love that word. I'm going to have to borrow that.
Yeah, I'm being inspired by it. I'll definitely use it. But shirking from home.
But you won't do it.
No. But I think that, it's always been of interest to me is how productive people actually are. And I ask this question, to multiple managers and business owners and individuals, just, how many productive hours do you really think people have in a day when it comes into lunch, it comes into coffee breaks, and it comes into call room conversations and all those sort of things? So if we're looking at how many productive hours are there in a day, do you have any sense, and maybe you actually have the stats behind it, how many productive hours there actually are when people are in the office? And does that change from a working from home perspective? Because there isn't someone coming up to your desk asking for this, or isn't being stopped on the way to the bathroom. I don't know, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, what I love on this topic is the case studies of the 4-day working week, where businesses, I think the first one was in New Zealand, where a study was done on the whole workforce, and they moved into 4-day working week.
It was an accounting firm, wasn't it?
Yeah, and productivity was of the business was evidenced to increase. And so I think it like in terms of the question of how many hours does someone have productive, that varies, because I can tell you as a working mum, when I was pre-babies, my work day was longer but less productive, and I had the freedom of time to go and have those coffees and the extended lunches and maybe a run in the middle of the day. But when you've got to get
like a commercial for working mums,
and when you come in at like 9 because you've got to do drop off, and you leave at 4:45 because you've got to do pickup, you've only got you're just so productive in those hours. And so I think it varies for everyone, and everyone has their individual nature. But I do think that's the point, right? Is that nowadays what we've opened up the opportunity for is individual needs. And so, people want the option to work from home at least a portion of the time. And we know all the surveys, the remote state of work, all the surveys are saying that 95% of people want to have the option to have the, work from home or anywhere for a portion of the time, whether that be 1 or 2 days a week, for example. People now look at going into the office as a collaboration opportunity, as a meeting, time to see teammates, have strategic discussions. It's productive time where we can get together, brainstorm, all those sorts of things. Not necessarily going to the office. I've heard lots of people say, well, I just went into the office and I sat at my desk all day. So what's the point of that? I may as well have just done that at home. I didn't need to catch a train, do a commute, all those things. So I think that is the point. Individual needs is now what managers have to equip themselves for. It's challenging, but that is the reality of the future of work.
I was thinking about, and sorry, I keep going back to the accreditation, but I find it so fascinating because I know it's a really good driver for putting these things into practice.
And I love that there's a baby in the background or a child while you're talking about it. That's perfect too.
Yes, I know.
Right on cue. We just wheeled that child in for the show.
Yeah.
We should have bought my kids. It would have been great.
You're quiet.
No, don't be quiet. Welcome them in.
Can I just quickly touch on something there? Sorry, Karen, to cut you off mid-sentence. I was at my brother's wedding in Italy, and he was in a little small town called Sudnacundra, and all the kids were running around. And the parents, I think they were the Australian parents trying to keep their kids quiet. And the priest said, no, we should be celebrating this. This is what we're here for. We're here for the kids. We're here for the family. We're here for the inclusion.
I love that.
And that was beautiful. And so that's just leading on from where you were going, and it's so true. Let the kids go in the background, and don't be embarrassed about it. Don't be embarrassed that that they're kids.
Yeah, it's like, it reminds me of the viral video of the BBC journalist who
That's
was
the best.
It's the best, isn't it? With
Which one? I didn't see it.
Oh, you have to see it. It's
That was
a little
toddler, almost 2 years old now, isn't it?
Yeah, it was pre-COVID, and he was trying to do a news report, and
he was
child,
live.
It was live TV. His toddler, sort of, maybe 3 or 4 year old, came into the room, and he was trying very hard and sort of pushing her away and going, go away. And then the little baby rocks in, and then the mother runs in and grabs them all and sort of tries to stay out of the camera view and runs out. These days, everyone will be like, fine, just bring them in and then they'll go.
Yeah, the guy,
part of it.
He was so focused, he didn't even really flinch. It was amazing.
Yeah.
You'll have to Google it, Jamie.
I've just Googled it. I've got it up. I'll check it after the show.
Finish the conversation first, Jamie, then you can watch it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't worry, I won't be watching it on my side. So anyway.
No, it's fine. No, my question was, it was going to more of an international view, I guess. I mean, we all, being that we, live and work in Australia, we can all relate to how, parents at work culturally works quite well for Australia. But if I think about especially in some of our neighbouring countries in the APAC region, culturally, there might be a nanny or a carer that comes into the home and does a lot of that caring, or they're culturally, it's just not as widely accepted where there is a dual working family. And so having that need for that accreditation or that push for a family flexible work environment probably isn't as, I'm not going to say required, but as a stronger push from an employee point of view. Yeah. So I wondered whether, the international side is something you guys are looking at, and how you're tackling that kind of from the perspective of how it's not so widely accepted or needed.
Yeah. It's true. The carer culture massively varies, and as we know, the carer culture is really well embedded in certainly in some, the Asian headquarters, Singapore and Hong Kong, for example. And so we have built this for Australia at this point because our data is Australian-based data, and we partner with UNICEF Australia and so, on their standards as well. But absolutely, the questions on this have been, okay, well, can this apply to, like, I run the APAC region. Can I apply this outside of Australia? What about New Zealand? Well, of course, this certification for you will be for Australia. However, of course, the standards can be applied in other countries. We have recently spoken with a number of countries that have gone, oh, that looks interesting. Taiwan was one of them. France is another. And so we definitely are looking at the international market and plan to roll out, when the time is right, to other countries. The conversation in the APAC region is interesting because the COVID, working from home environment has meant that, again, a lot of parents who traditionally have very long hours because they do have the carers at home, have seen their children a lot more than they would have otherwise, and have started to see that is actually quite a nice thing. And even if it just means having a lunch break and the kids might be there, or whatever it has been, they've had extended lockdowns in many countries. So yeah, I think that conversation, I think we're going to see it shift. I do think that, as it will shift globally, I think we're going to very much see this shift in APAC in particular. It has been shifting. It's been a real well-being focused conversation, the conversations around families. How do we support parents and carers' well-being? Because they are, under, long hours and a lot of pressure, sort of different demands than we have here in Australia. Every country has its own sort of demands, but I do think we're going to see it shift again now.
Sticking with the international theme, I'm more thinking, obviously, from overseas foreign nationals working in Australia or in other countries who don't have the benefits afforded to them that local Australian citizens of permanent residence. Just Australia, for this example, obviously they'll have their different programs in different countries. So I was just wondering if you've had any thought around that, or if there's been any moves on policy, or how overseas foreign nationals who don't have benefits are treated when compared to the locals? Do they get any preferential treatment, or has there been consideration, or is that an area that may not have yet come to the front or the fore of the conversation?
That's a very company-specific question in my experience. I think, every organisation does approach this a little bit differently, but on the whole, it still defaults back to the legislation of the country that the person is employed in, I think. And I'm not close enough to this topic, I suppose, to probably be able to speak with authority. But sort of if you've outsourced a function, or you've got a team working in another country but supporting Australia, I'm not seeing except for in organisations where policies are moving to a global position. So on the topic of parental leave, for example, we look at, right, let's roll this out globally. Everyone should be entitled to this. It doesn't matter what the culture of the country is at that point in time. And that's sometimes where some resistance might come in as well to offering big numbers of weeks, like 26 weeks, for example. That is not the case culturally in many Asian countries or in the US, for example. And so, there might be resistance on going that far, because whilst that might be leading in Australia, it's just too far to do that globally. And so they'll bring it down and find a happy medium that everyone globally can benefit from, which I think there's a lot of value in, and employees really sort of value that. So global policy changes I do see, but when you've got sort of local country laws, I don't see a shift in that yet.
Okay.
Kiri, you mentioned earlier around organisations who are already living and breathing and doing the family-friendly workplaces. Have you found it's particular sectors that have been supporting this concept and getting behind you guys initially, or is it a good cross-section across the Australian workplaces?
Well, I mean, I will say, of course, financial services and professional services for us were early adopters, sort of a decade ago, and are probably further along the journey than some other industries. But these days, it is, all and sundry. We see really small organisations from 20 people, looking at this and going, how can we have a policy? Because do we need a policy when there's only 20 of us? But we want to make sure our people have, access to the best. And then we want them to know that we support their families, right through to, 60,000 employees and everything in between across all the industries. What I do notice is the industries move in waves. So if one leader in an industry, like an insurance, company, will sort of QBE from our perspective in insurance is a leader, then others will go look to, to them to go, okay, what's the best practice? And same, in the tech industry, a couple do it. They go pharmaceuticals, couple, and they sort of, so that's one of the great things about doing certifications, is that the leaders can demonstrate how to do it and then inspire others in the same industry. And then all the employees at the end result are benefiting from this, all the parents and the carers out there. We just need leaders to show how it's done, and then, others will follow. That's sort of the way I've seen it go.
A thought, or something I suppose I'm personally experiencing, is my work week has changed. My work day has changed. It hasn't gone that traditional 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And COVID has certainly accelerated, I suppose influenced how I operate. Do you think that people's work week will change to cater for that? So what I'm saying is will people start to work on a Saturday? Will they start to work on a Sunday? Will they have work after bedtime? I mean, can you see that changing as well? Because what I'm sort of imagining, if I have a certain amount of work to do in one day, but I have the caring duties and I have, the other parts that go in, will my work day and therefore my work week change?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny hearing you say that, because I'm thinking, have you always worked in the great outdoors? Probably not.
Not at all. I've always been stuck in an office and pre-kids. That was, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. So it's it's a whole different change.
Yeah, it's not just about the hours and when you do the hours. It's about where you do the hours. And sometimes I do sit outside now on my balcony in the sun and do a video call, and just being able to have some sunshine in the middle of the day, in the middle of winter, in a sun track, that's such a nice thing to be able to do. And so it's not just about any time, it's about anywhere. And also different people's physical sort of productivity differs as well. Like some people are really great morning people. That is not me. I need to go for a walk before I'm productive. Some people are really awesome at midnight. Again, that's not me either. I'm somewhere in the middle. And to allow people to be able to work when they work at their best. So you are a morning person. Get started at 4 a.m. Our head of marketing, she's at it from 4 a.m. every day. And,
Wow.
but she'll finish earlier than some of us because that's her, sort of productivity. And so I think there's all of that. I think everyone needs to, and back to what I was saying earlier, managers, really need to be open to the individualities of their teams, because we'll get the best out of everyone if we allow them to work when they're at their best, where they can work their best. And there needs to obviously be some parameters around that in terms of collaboration and sort of seeing our team members, and also when.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie, you've kind of asked that question in a current day context, but my mind kind of goes a little bit further into the actual future in when offices, do start to open up. There are some expectations from organisations, not only from their own policies perspectives, but there might be immigration expectations excuse me, around people being actually in the office. I know some visa types, and Jamie, you're probably more better to comment on this, but I know some visa types in the US where, you are tied to a location and there's a requirement from a residency or work permit perspective that you're in the office for a certain amount of days of the week. So, I wonder what the typical work week will look like when the world is safe again, so to speak, and there's an expectation or a requirement for us to physically be in the office around, your marketing person at 4 a.m. You're going to be able to get into the office at 4 a.m., or are we just going to find that, we all do so much chopping and changing that we burn ourselves out? Because I know personally doing a lot of that flipping between contexts does become quite fatiguing in ourselves, and we might be creating another bigger issue of fatigue down the track as well post COVID. So I didn't know whether you had any views, and it's a bit of an extension, a repeat of Jamie's question, but what would the typical working week look like once all the offices are open, so to speak? Surely not Saturday, Sundays.
Well, let's hope not. But
yeah.
I think that one of the main things that the research is showing is just that people want to be able to work from home for a portion of time. So to your point about, you don't want to have this constant, every week looks different. You don't quite know. Everyone needs their own routines, but it's just that not everyone necessarily now will have the 9 to 5 routine all at the same time, because from all the reading I do and the research, I think that is dead. I do think that we absolutely need to expect that people will want some time that is theirs, that is flexible in the way that they work. And it's not to say that they won't be office time, and it might be 60, 70% of the time, but there is a portion of time where you still get to retain this. And people say, I get most of my work done when I'm working from home. That's when I get everything, I get on top of it all. And my most productive when I'm at home, because when you're in the office, you're talking to your colleagues, and that in itself has its own value, of course, from a social perspective, but also from a collaboration and ideas and perspective, innovation. But yeah, I think that we will find a new routine, and I do not think it'll be 100% of the time in the office. And I think people's start and finish times will shift as well. I think we'll see maybe not 4 a.m, but maybe 8, 7 a.m, a bit more regularly. There might have been the odd people that did that before, but now we'll see a bit more of that. And later finishes, the sort of 7 o'clock finishes. And so, extension of the hours, not everyone doing exactly the same thing at the same time. That will help with commute and public transport, sort of issues, and that helps the environment. So yeah, I think that's what we need to be prepared for.
So just sticking with Karen's future, which is the post-COVID reality, when things sort of shift back to normal, which I agree with you. I don't think they ever will. How do companies assess or determine what your work language, there's that book, What's My Love Language? I mean, you probably get one going, what's my work language? I mean, how do the companies already go out there and start doing surveys or start figuring out what their individual people, what the individual employees actually operate like? And I'm like you, I mean, we've got people who want to start at 7, and other people who want to work till 12 at midnight, and that's just their own body clocks, their own rhythm. Are companies actually starting to employ questionnaires or trying to find out how that fits in? And then once they've got that rhythm of the person, how do that fit into an actual working schedule or working on output?
Yeah, there's been so much research done by organisations on their people, on their flexible work needs. Karen, I can see you nodding. You probably know this. And so many pulse surveys and what are your needs, checking in, because all the flexible work policies are being updated and looked at and reviewed, and does it match the new world that we're in? And they've got to make sure that they've listened to their people before they do that. So yes, with our clients absolutely are running lots of different engagement surveys and pulse surveys to just ensure that they understand that what their people are expecting, because they'll have a talent issue if they don't get it right. And from there, once the policies they think, okay, we think this is what our people want, then it's talking to the managers. And then it gets down to managers go, but I need real clear guidelines because this is really hard to manage. How can I manage? Everyone wants something different. You need to put in the policy exactly. And that's really challenging. I think that's what HR teams are facing at the moment is it's not so simple now as these are the rules. Every manager will have to create a different structure for their team, and they may be able to mandate that some days everyone has to be in the office for particular meetings, but then we've got flexibility on the other days. I think once, offices have returned to being open fully, and a lot of, there's a lot of projects out there about real estate. Do we need as much space anymore? We know that 20 to 30% of the time people might not be here. So what do we do about that? So all that conversation is happening as well. It's all being looked at.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Kiri. And I was nodding my head because I guess organizations also need to be careful if they're asking all these questions. They need to do 2 things. They need to take that data and acknowledge that they've received it, because it's like there's nothing worse than getting 10 surveys in any portion of your life, right, and going, I'm glad I did that. It went into the ether, it went nowhere, and it has showed no productivity. So organizations need to acknowledge they've received it and then also do something with that data and turn it into something real, right? And I guess what we're talking about today is a good example of that. I wondered whether you could go into a little bit of detail or give us an example maybe around whether it's following your guidelines or following or adopting these certification, how companies can use that to support families, potentially. So let's say for an example of 2 parents or a single parent working a very senior or demanding job, which makes it difficult, I guess, for dedicating that chopping and changing all that time to their kids. What support does this program provide to those organizations, and then what trickles down to the employees in a support form?
Yeah. So in that instance where, and it's certainly not uncommon now, where you've got 2 parents, both in demanding jobs, and kids that need them too. That's your other demanding job, as we know. What's the role of the organisation in that instance? And I think more and more, it doesn't really matter whether the role is a very senior role, because different levels of jobs can be very demanding. What organisations more and more are acknowledging and are doing is looking at ways to support childcare, for example, whether that be financially or whether that be putting in some kind of, and lately, virtual vacation care program, even in school holidays, sometimes with after school programs, or maybe it's through just, we know that your kids matter, essentially, and it might be creating a kid-friendly space in the office so that the kid doesn't feel like they're not welcome in the office. And there's a lot more of that conversation occurring about how can we create spaces that are family friendly within an office, which will also encourage people to spend time in the office. It's about looking at the wellbeing needs as well. So knowing that 2 people in demanding jobs with young kids, probably looking after themselves is somewhere right down the bottom of that list. And so creating some time during work hours to talk about family, to share experience with colleagues on what's going on. Sometimes just a problem shared is a problem halved. And creating these employee network groups where people have the opportunity to talk to other parents and carers in the organisation, and allowing that conversation in the workplace, not sort of just pretending that when we're at work, that's work and the rest of your life is for yourself to sort out once you get home. But just allowing people to be the full selves, that really helps with well-being. And acknowledging that the pressures and the competing demands on parents and carers is of a unique type, and giving some really specialised well-being sort of support to parents and carers, in its own form. And it also education. So the education forums that our clients give their people, it means they don't have to go and do it outside of work time. They've been given a little bit of space during work hours to get educated on digital well-being for kids. Like, we need to know how to, screen time with kids. What are we doing about it? Give them some time during their workday to learn that, because otherwise they've got to do it outside of work. Toddlers, they're really hard. So let's acknowledge that. And it's not just about parental leave, it's about the whole thing. Teenagers, that phase is hard too. So let's give you some time on this during work hours. So there's just so many different ways of looking at how organisations are supporting this. But the main thing is just acknowledging that there's competing demands and being open to the conversation about it.
It's such a brave new world, isn't it? I mean, my head is spinning with all of, the things I'm thinking. Do I have, what are our policies? Do we have, certification? Obviously not through you at this stage. But I'm wondering, for our audience out there, for the mobility practitioners or the HR practitioners or business owners who are thinking, hang on, I want to start to get some of these things in place. Where do they start? Like, where's one area that they can go? I'm guessing through your organisation is probably where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be my only answer, right? Obviously.
Hey, that was a nice little handle there, right? Like, I just expect you to grab it and run with it.
She's being her true self.
Yeah, exactly.
Her whole self.
Yeah. I mean, really, I don't have another answer, because this is what we live and breathe. How do organisations build a family-friendly culture? And we have an employer membership, which is really just a sort of strategic partnership with HR teams and business leaders on what is the baseline that you need to do. We can guide on best practice policy and practices and leader enablement throughout this conversation. So yeah, I'm not going to say go anywhere else other than us, because that's the best way to get the support.
No, that's very fair. I mean, you've sort of done all the hard work and heavy lifting over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And it's because as I said, my head's sort of spinning. I was thinking, as you're saying, do we have a domestic violence policy? I don't know. Yeah. I mean, just the little things like that to understand. And I agree. I think keeping people in your environment to say, hey, I get you and I get your needs and I get your anxieties here. I can hook you up with an organisation who can give you the information, or I can direct you to that. I think it's invaluable.
Exactly right. Yeah. And if we're not the experts, because gosh, we're not the experts on it all, then we partner. We've selected our partners that we refer our organisations onto in the different areas of need. So it's so important. There is so many different elements to what makes up a family-friendly culture, and so many different layers. But yeah, I can say that more and more as time goes by and the years go by, it's what talent will be expecting.
Yeah. And I know Jamie said, his head spinning, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this podcast also are doing the same thing. Do we have this? Do we have that? So you're right. I think having that conversation and establishing that baseline internally is the best place for them to start. Thank you so much for your time today, Kiri. It's been very educational. I really wish this kind of certification thing was around, 10 years ago when I was going through that. Yeah. But, better late than never, right? So thank you for bringing that on behalf of all the parents.
Absolutely.
To organisations. Yeah.
Yeah, Kiri, I echo Karen's comments. I think that it's been such a wonderful insight into what is possible and what the future could and should look like. I really think that, employers will embrace it. I think that it sounds like it's going to be better for everyone, better for well-being, better for profitability of the business, better for retention. It sounds like there's no real downside to move in this direction, and we can probably thank another thing we can thank COVID for is a good kick in this direction. So, but more importantly, thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic.
Oh, thank you both for the conversation. That was just really awesome to talk to you both.
It's been great.
Okay.
Pleasure.
Thanks,
you.
Kiri. All right,
Bye.
see ya. Bye.
Bye.